So families have all kinds of secrets, and my family is no different from really any of yours. Like, there was the time that my father pretended he was nuts so he wouldn't be drafted, and I'm sure all of your fathers did exactly the same thing, right? Well, one of my favorite secrets is about my Aunt Betty. I'm from Philadelphia. We have aunts in Philadelphia, not aunts the way you have here. So my Aunt Betty was my favorite aunt when I was growing up. I used to go to her house all the time when I was little, and it was a playland, because Aunt Betty lived with her brother, Uncle Meyer, and her boyfriend, Uncle Phil, who was Catholic, but that's a whole other story, would often be there while I was there. And when I was there, I was a princess. Aunt Betty would cook me chicken soup. And I have to tell you, she made the best chicken soup in the world. And I would take naps on Uncle Phil's ample stomach. And Uncle Meyer would tell me dirty jokes and then say, shh, don't tell your parents. He had the best dirty jokes. But my favorite part of visiting Aunt Betty was we would go shopping. Now, shopping meant that we would go upstairs to her bedroom. She would open up her drawer and she would say, this drawer, you can have anything you want in this drawer, but it's a secret. Don't tell your mother and your father that I'm giving you this stuff. So anything in here you want, anything in here is secret, but it's yours. So I would rummage. And I'd usually come out of it with a couple pairs of gaudy clip-on earrings or some kind of costume jewelry that to a 7-year-old was treasure. And in my royal accoutrements, I would march downstairs. And Uncle Meyer and Uncle Phil would tell me that I was a princess. And then I would go home wearing my new jewels, and my parents knew that these were secrets and wouldn't say anything about them, and I would tuck them away with the rest of my treasure. Now, as I grew up, I didn't go see Aunt Betty and Uncle Meyer and Uncle Phil anywhere near as often, and when I did, it was the 15-year-old thing of, this is boring. But I'd listen to them talk. Mostly, they talked about other family members. Every so often when Phil wasn't there, Betty would say, you can't tell anybody this, but you know, I'm not going to do anything with him until we get married, and he's Catholic and I'm Jewish, so I'm a virgin. It's important that you don't do things with people unless you're going to marry them. And she would tell me these things as life lessons. And I was 15 and then 16 and 17 and riddled with hormones, so I didn't really listen to her life lessons. We all felt kind of sorry for Phil. We laughed at him behind his back because he was devoted to Betty, and she clearly just wasn't putting out for him as far as we could tell. When I was in my early 20s, Phil had a stroke. He was in the hospital for probably 18 months, an invalid, before he died, and Betty visited him every single day. So clearly there was something there that we didn't know about for all the kvetching that she did. In my mid-20s, Betty died. And I was devastated. I'd adored Aunt Betty for all that I complained about her in my teen years. And after we buried her, my mother and I were up in her bedroom cleaning things out, getting the house ready to be sold. I was at one end of the bureau pulling out yellowed slips and old underwear and bras from the 1950s and 40s to give away to the Goodwill. My mother was rummaging through the other side of the bureau, and I saw her open that drawer where I used to go shopping. And she's pulling out handfuls of what I could clearly see was really junky jewelry. And I'm trying not to cry, and my mother's busy doing her work, and then all of a sudden she plops down on the bed and starts laughing. And she laughs harder and harder until tears are streaming down her face, and I'm saying, Mom, what's so funny? And all she can do is hold out to me 2 curled photographs. I take them and look at them. When I knew Betty, she was an old woman with sagging breasts and a heavy figure, and she looked kind of like Penny Marshall on a really bad day. But in these pictures, there was a beautiful young woman with a lush body and pert breasts and beautiful hips, and I know this because that was my Aunt Betty standing naked in front of a rose bush with a carefully placed rose just where it needed to be. I sat there looking at these pictures and I thought, Betty was right. There were secrets in that drawer. And then I started laughing too, and I realized that I wasn't the only princess in that house. Thank you.